How do we get that compass pointing due constitutional north? I know there are various ways and people have various solutions. In a nutshell, what is yours?
The first thing we have to do is get facts. It's one of the things that's so important about today's proceedings at the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform and the House Judiciary Committee. They're gathering a lot of information, and with that information we can figure out how best to proceed to make sure that these things never happen in the future and to make sure that any wrongdoings are properly addressed.
Can the swamp fix the swamp? Can Washington, D.C. fix Washington, D.C., or is it going to take an outside entity? I know you're not a fan, for example, of using Article 5 of the United States Constitution to amend the Constitution by the individual states by convening and proffering amendments to the Constitution. What would be your methodology?
Well, the swamp is very difficult to drain. It's one of the reasons why constitutionally limited government is so important. The bigger the federal government gets, the more difficult it becomes for the people to rein it in. Under our system, ultimately, it is, in fact, the people who are the sovereigns, and the people can't change it by electing different personnel to oversee the operation of the federal government. This can be difficult. And yeah, you're right. There are a couple of options available to amend the Constitution under Article 5. The one that's been used for all 27 of our amendments is the one in which Congress itself proposes a constitutional amendment by a two-thirds supermajority vote and then three-fourths of the states ratify. You mentioned another one where the call for a constitutional convention is made by two-thirds of the state legislatures, and those amendments become effective if ratified by three-fourths of the states. Even though that one hasn't been used, it could be. And we'll see what happens there.
And you look at Bruce Orr as an example of what I'm talking about. Here he is still at the Department of Justice. You know, he deserves his day in court, if you will, but he's still at the DOJ. He still represents what appears to be the actual Russian collusion that is not being investigated. Sure, he's answering questions by the United States, from the United States Congress, from members of the Intel Committee and other committee members. But don't we need more than that to actually clean up the swamp? Don't we have to hold these people accountable in a court of law? Because we know that the Congress doesn't have prosecutorial authority.
It doesn't. That authority is vested in the executive branch. We can't force that. It wouldn't be our prerogative to do so. But you're right. People who have broken the law face the potential of prosecution under the law. Setting the public record is also itself important so that people can be aware of this. But I want to get back to the central theme that this is what big government is. This is what big government does. When Godzilla steps on your house, it's not necessarily because Godzilla hates you in particular or wants to eat you in particular for lunch. It's because he's Godzilla and he's huge and your house happens to be there. That's exactly why we have a Constitution, and that's exactly why our Constitution limits the federal government's power to a few specific areas that we've been neglecting over the last 80 years in pursuit of a perpetual expansion of federal largesse.
You're on the Judiciary Committee trying to get some answers regarding the previous administrations and its apparent abuse of power, trying to get the federal Leviathan to produce documents. That would be the FBI, Department of Justice, trying to produce documents. Where do you all stand right now? Can you report to the American people where you stand on this?
Where we stand is that we're still gathering information. Where we stand is that we can't move any faster than they're willing to supply the documents. I hope and expect that at some point, if they continue to refuse to cooperate, there will be consequences to them. We can always cut their funding unless or until such time as they deliver to us the information we need to evaluate their work and, where appropriate, their malfeasance.
Next week, of course, you begin the hearings for Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. We should mention that you were on the short list for the President of the United States, as far as we know, as a possible nominee to the United States Supreme Court. Congratulations with that. Last week, though, we heard from Kavanaugh indirectly through a colleague of yours, a United States Senator, saying that he believed that Roe versus Wade is established law. Now, I hope that that's a misquote. Is this one of the things you might question him about, whether Roe versus Wade is established law versus established case law?
Look, in proceedings like these, in hearings like those that we're going to be having next week for Judge Kavanaugh, a question like that is not going to be answered. They'll invoke the canons of judicial ethics that prohibit them from answering a question that might come up before them if they are to be confirmed. Now, the fact that he acknowledged that it's established law doesn't necessarily mean that he agrees with it. Doesn't necessarily mean that he believes that it's the inexorable command of the Constitution or that it couldn't be revisited. He is perhaps just acknowledging the fact that it was decided 45 years ago and remains on the books today.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.